Welcome to another human read audiobook by the United Marxist Pact Discord server, link below in the description. In this series, we continue our investigation into the initial construction, the organizational structure, and the principles and tactics of the form of worker organization, capable of seizing political power and establishing the revolutionary proletarian dictatorship and communality, which can in turn produce the communist mode of production through the shared class interests of the workers of the entire world. Our goal is to compile, analyze, and elaborate on what all these texts have to say about this, and at the end have a strong understanding of the exact scientific process of it, particularly in general terms. At the end of our readings as a whole, we will try to put it all together and present it as a coherent whole in an educational video with associated notation. Today's reading will be the 1922 Third Communist International's Fourth Congress, and particularly the theses presented by the Communist Party of Italy. We have a pre-written textual analysis on the terms of the aforementioned topics, which is also posted in the pinned comment if you prefer to read it on text, or follow the link in the description to a read-only version of my Google Docs notes. This will summarize the contents of the text, but is no replacement for the actual reading itself, for the sake of understanding the context. In addition, in the reading I supply my own commentary, critiques, additions, etc., which may be helpful to understanding some particularities. Onto the general analysis. In this text, in terms of advising the formation of a working party, expresses the first seeds of what will later be called organic centralism. It specifies more about what parties should be considered communist and allowed entrance into the international. Importantly, talks about what is necessary when workers lack organization. While the prerequisites for communist revolution are objective, in that they are both part of the social conditions of capital, they are also subjective in terms of the working class successfully taking action in these objective conditions. These subjective conditions are what the party must focus on, as it cannot truly change the objective ones. For the party, this means having a correct program with a defined organization that directs the workers with partial interests recognize and take action for the general interests of the proletariat, which requires the party having influence over the workers' economic organizations and bring them under its direction. Because of these objective and subjective conditions being verifiable, the International should not merely accept parties based on their declared adherence to required principles, but also verify the process by which they reach their methods for these principles, and that the organizations truly understand it. This can involve a system of organic centralism, which guarantees all members agree with and understand the program, which in turn requires the program be accepted, universally applicable, precise, have continuity, and allow for unity. Because solid organizations need solid rules which assure individual impartial application, these rules must be unitary and have continuity. In lines with the needs or subjective conditions, the task of the Communist Party at all times is to create more communists. The mood of the masses is influenced by the objective conditions, which we lack control over, but can apply different tactics in response to. These objective conditions create the basis for influence of the party on the masses and their organizations. The tactics must at all times transcend proselytization and must be propaganda through praxis, participating in worker movements and educating the masses of the need for communism, the party, and the basis of the party's principles. Experience will aid in increasing the ability to carry this out. To this end, the party must drive the masses to undertake struggle for their immediate demands that are impossible for the bourgeois government to acquiesce for, while pushing for general struggle during these on the grounds of their impossibility within capitalism. This causes the proletariat to understand that the bourgeois governments cannot achieve their demands, which a party then agitates to overthrow them on the grounds that it cannot provide for the masses' interests. To do this, the party does entryism into trade unions, cooperatives, and all other worker organizations, developing organizational networks in all forms of party activity, such as armed struggle and military action, education and culture, youth and women's work, penetration into the army, and so on, While doing so, it pushes against splits and tries to maximize the extension of the base. Under objective conditions which cause the workers to leave their organizations for one struggle or another, the party will change tactics so that it can reach the proletariat without their organizations, take the center of the struggle, and combat reactionist capitalist centralization, which imposes itself on a scattered working class with left opportunist leadership. The centralization of the party must pursue is a synthesis of spontaneous forces of the vanguard of various countries, along with the centralization of organizational apparatuses that stop disciplinary crises. Under these conditions, unity of methods of struggle and clarity of program and tactics are needed. And now I will begin the full audiobook reading. I hope you enjoyed the session and will attend next time as well. All right, so next up we have for our investigation into worker organization that can bring about the dictatorship of the proletariat. We are reading the 1922 Third Communist International's Fourth Congress. And this text is the theses presented by the Communist Party of Italy. It has a preface, Constitution of the Communist Parties and the Communist International, text on the conquest of the masses, the United Front, the workers' government, and the conquest of the unorganized masses. So let's get started. Although the agenda of the Fourth Congress contained 2 paragraphs concerning the program of the International in sections and tactics, the general discussion of these important topics were postponed to the Fifth Congress. Nevertheless, our delegation, majority, prepared a project of theses on the tactics of the International, which are not different from the directives on which the ones presented at the Party Congress and approved by the party, March 1922, were drafted, and on which the summary was drawn up, which the majority delegation marked as a platform in the discussion of the enlargement of June 1922. Keep saying 22nd. 1922. The publication of these theses clarifies the thinking of the majority of the party on the question of general tactics at a time of the Congress of the International. Needless to add, they are a theoretical contribution and not a program of action that the party intends to follow. Preface. The necessary prerequisites for the achievement of the revolutionary aims of the Communist International are objective in nature, insofar as they lie in the situation of the capitalist regime and in the stage of the crisis it's going through, and they're subjective in nature insofar as they concern the ability of the working class to fight for the overthrow of the bourgeois power and organize its dictatorship with unity of action. That is, to succeed in subordinating all the partial interests of limited groups to the general interests of the whole proletariat, and to the final goal of the revolution. The subjective conditions are of a double order, namely, 1. The existence of communist parties endowed with a clear programmatic vision and a well-defined organization that ensures their unity of action. 2. The degree of influence of the Communist Party on the mass of workers and on their economic organizations, which puts the Communist Party in preponderance over all other political tendencies of the proletariat. The question of tactics consists in seeking the means which will best enable the Communist parties to realize simultaneously these revolutionary conditions on a subjective nature, based on the objective conditions and the procedure of their developments. The descriptive chapters of Zinovsev's thesis on the international politico-economic situation, the offensive of capital, and the situation of the workers' movement are quoted at this point. We're going to take this entire bit. It's a good part. All right, so subjective conditions to subordinate all partial individualistic interests to the general interests of the whole and to the necessity of the eventual decisive moment include 1. A communist party with a correct program and a defined organization that directs the workers who lack such general interests. 2. A communist party that has influence over the workers' economic organizations, which brings them under direction. And a question of tactics consists in seeking the means which will best enable the Communist Party to realize simultaneously these revolutionary conditions of a subjective nature. on the objective conditions and procedure of their developments. So right here, it recognizes the need for a defined organization. I would love it if it would give explanation on what that organization looks like. It just says that it achieves these goals, but doesn't actually say, anything about how one would structure themselves to do such a thing. You're expected to just figure it out as usual. Oh, this isn't a text for that. It's a preface. Okay, continuing. Constitution of the Communist Parties and of the Communist International. The failure of the Second International and the success of the Russian Revolution have given rise to the reconstitution of the revolutionary ideology of the proletariat and its political reorganization in the ranks of the Communist International. The Communist International, in order to take up its task of unifying the struggles of all the proletariat in all countries towards the final goal of world revolution, must first of all ensure its programmatic and organizational unity. All sections and all militants of the Communist International must be committed by their adherence in principle to the common program of the Communist International. The international organization, eliminating all vestiges of the federalism of the old international, must ensure maximum centralization and discipline. This process is still taking place through the difficulties that arise, ranging from the different conditions of the various countries and the traditions of opportunism. It will be effectively solved not by mechanical expedients, but by the realization of an effective unity of method. That's a mechanical expedient. Anyway, which highlights the common feature of the action of the vanguard of the proletariat in the different countries. So, in other words, they're saying this problem will be solved through a universal, effective action, a tactic, which tells the vanguard of the proletariat in various countries what they need to do in order to deal with it. That would be a mechanical expedient, unless I'm misunderstanding what they're trying to say there. It's a formalized, organized response which works, that they're claiming will be developed. Anyway, it is not possible to admit that any political group can be included in the International Revolutionary Discipline Organization by virtue of its simple adhesion to given texts, with the promise of the fulfillment of a series of commitments. On the contrary, it is necessary to take into account the real process carried out in the organized groups acting in proletarian politics, parties, and tendencies, the formation of their ideology and their experience of action in order to judge if and to what extent they can be part of the Communist International. Okay. The disciplinary crises of the Communist International are based on a double aspect of traditional opportunism today. One of accepting with enthusiasm the formulations of the tactical experience of the Communist International without understanding its solid interconnection with revolutionary aims, but taking the external forms of its application as a return to the old opportunist methods which are deprived of any consciousness or a revolutionary purposive will. And the other which rejects these tactical formulations with a superficial criticism, which portrays them as a renunciation, retreat from the revolutionary programmatic aims. In both cases, it is a matter of misunderstanding of the relationship between carrying out the means and the communist ends. Okay, we're going to summarize this real quick. So, the International should not accept parties based solely on their adherence to required principles, but rather they should instead verify the process by which they reach their methods and if they actually understand it. Because if they're just doing it by rote with no understanding, then that means that they are going to lack dynamism. They're going to lack the ability to actually apply what they are doing to their own material conditions. Back to the text. The disciplinary I don't know if I agree with that either. So, and let me explain why. if you've got a factory and the factory's job is to produce probably actually you got a media outlet and its job is to produce media for audiences, right? Do all the people within the corporation, within the media corporation, does the media corporation itself need to understand what it's important to produce for their conditions? To some degree, yeah. It won't be as effective if they don't understand, but they can still produce propaganda, especially if they've got somebody else telling them what to put out. That's really common, in fact. Um, for the most part, I'm sure you've seen that video where every single freaking media company has and channel has everybody at about the same time saying um, this is a threat to our democracy, right? And they're reading the lines by rote. Um, this is in fact quite effective. It's more than effective. It's extremely efficient. So, I think that you can absolutely use formulaic models in order to achieve goals. Maybe not perfectly, maybe it lacks some dynamism, but that doesn't mean that it fails in its intended purpose. Quite the contrary. Um, so I understand exactly what their critique of it is, but I think that at the same time, you know, they're overstating the problem. Continuing. The disciplinary crises of the Alliance International are based on a double aspect of traditional opportunism today. One of accepting with enthusiasm the formulations of the tactical experience of the Alliance International without understanding its solid interconnection with revolutionary aims, but taking the external forms of its application as a return to the old opportunist methods which are deprived of any consciousness or of a revolutionary purpose of will. And with the other rejects these tactical formulations with a superficial, we just read that. Sorry. Um, anyway, in order to eliminate opportunist dangers and disciplinary crises, the Alliance International must base its organizational centralization on clarity and precision of its tactical resolutions, with the exact definition of the methods to be applied. A political organization, for example, founded on the voluntary adherence of all its members, responds to the demands of a centralized action only when all of its components have seen and accepted a set of methods that can be ordered from the center to be applied into various situations. The prestige and authority of the center, which have no material means of disciplinary punishment at their disposal, but make use of coefficients that remain in the domain of psychological factors, absolutely demand clarity, precision, and continuity in programmatic proclamations and methods of struggle. In this lies the only guarantee of being able to constitute a center of effective unitary action of the international proletariat. Okay. So this is arguing that only through consensus of everybody within the organization can you have guarantee that everybody actually understands the platform and achieve actual unity. I have my criticisms of this, of which there are many. But let's leave that to the side for now. A solid organization arises only from the stability of its organizational rules, which, by assuring each individual of their impartial application, reduces dissension and desertion to a minimum. Organizational statutes, no less than ideology and tactical norms, must give an impression of unity and continuity. This I agree with strongly. Actually, I'm taking notes. I should take this for argument for organic centralism. And we're also going to take this. Because of these considerations based on a rich experience in the transition from the period of construction of the International Communist Parties to a period of action of the International Communist Party, it is necessary to eliminate abnormal rules of organization. These include the mergers of isolated sections of the International with other political bodies, the fact that some of these can be constituted not on the criterion of personal membership but on the criterion of adhesion to the workers' organizations, the existence of fractions of groups organized on the basis of different, quote, tendencies within the organization, and systematic penetration and entryism in other bodies of a political nature and discipline, which applies even more to those of a military nature. So basically, they're saying don't record and don't record these things that are individual for a given country's conditions. Well, maybe not record, but don't systematize. Don't say do this in this situation for this abnormal circumstance. Only talk about universals here. To the extent that the International applies such expedients, manifestations of federalism and disciplinary ruptures will occur. The process of eliminating these abnormalities were to be halted or reversed, or they were to become widespread. The danger of a relapse into opportunism would be extremely serious. Okay, let's go through the. All right, so organic centralism, it didn't actually say it outright, but is organic centralism, allows guarantee that all members agree with and understand the program. That's not the case. I can agree with something and not understand it. Which requires that the program be 1, accepted, 2, universally applicable, 3, precise, 4, have continuity, and 5, allow for unity. And my critique of this, just this bit here, we'll talk about some other stuff later, I'm sure, when they start talking about splits, and how those are inevitable, even when action isn't being, or basically splits are always going to happen and you shouldn't try to stop them, more or less. So Coffee says, we're looking at parts on one hand and just the whole on the other. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean. Organic centralism. This isn't a text on organic centralism. That hasn't actually been developed yet, I don't think. It's in its early phases. This is just talking about the need for universal acceptance among the party's members and consensus. Everybody having consensus on all stuff. So the other issue here, let's see, where was the other bit? Sorry. Oh, yes. It's inefficient. Not everything has to be universally applicable. Not everybody has to understand every single bit of the party action. Now, if it's saying, what was it? So all its components have seen accepted a set of methods that can be ordered by a censor to be applied in various situations. If it was saying that was pertinent to their particular section, then that would be entirely viable. But I might, for example, be involved within the, let's say, running propaganda, going in and distributing leaflets. It's not actually particularly important to me about the stuff to do with I don't know, some other tactic or activity of the party that I have no experience with or knowledge of, right? It's just outside of my wheelhouse. It's not important to me. I don't understand why I would have an opinion on it, sure, but I'm not sure why my opinion would actually matter. Um, anyway, then solid organizations need solid rules, which assures individuals impartial application. They must be unitary and have continuity. And I agree on the need for continuity and all of this stuff that's been stated above, by the way. Continuity is very, very important. You need to have some sort of very good reason for any sort of break. The conquest of the masses. Back to text. The fundamental task of the Communist parties is the conquest of an ever greater influence on the masses. To this end, they must resort to all those tactical means which the objective situation makes appropriate and which will ensure an ever increasing extension of the influence of the party on both an ideological level and on the various forms of organization of the party into the strata of the proletariat. The conquest of the masses cannot be achieved with mere propaganda of the party's ideology and with simple proselytism, but by participating in all those actions to which the proletarians are driven by their economic condition. It is necessary to make the workers understand that these actions cannot in themselves ensure the triumph of their interests. They can only provide an experience, an organizational result, and a will to fight to be framed in the general revolutionary struggle. This is achieved not by denying such actions, but by stimulating them, by inciting the workers to undertake them, by presenting them with those immediate demands which serve to bring about an ever larger union of participants in the struggle. Okay. I'll take that. Okay, so the fundamental task is to create more communists. The objective situation deterrence tactics which fit in to achieve this. The objective conditions create the basis for influence of the party on the masses and their organizations, because the objective conditions are, of course, there's a depression going on and people are under economic stress and take immediate action, and that creates the condition for us to get involved. So our tactics have to transcend mere proselytization. We must also engage in propaganda of the deed through participation in those worker movements. In the midst of those worker movements, we educate and develop educate the masses and masses in terms of the need for communism and the party. That's not precise, but yeah, pretty much. And develop its own experiences and tactics through the struggle. The party must drive the masses to undertake struggle for immediate demands so that all that can occur. Back to the text. Even in situations of normal development of capitalism, for the revolutionary Marxist parties, it was fundamental necessity to fight for the concrete economic claims of the proletarian groups on the terrain of the trade unions and other such groups. Claims of a general social political order must also serve revolutionary work. But these demands must not form the ground for a compromise of the bourgeoisie through which the proletariat pays for its concessions by renouncing the independence of its class organizations and the propaganda of its revolutionary program and methods. Through the action for partial claims, the Communist Party achieves a contact with the masses, which allows it to make new proselytize further. Because by supplementing with its propaganda the lessons of experience, the party gains sympathy and popularity and creates around itself a whole wider network of organization connected to the deepest strata of the masses, on the other hand to the leading center of the party itself. In this way, a unified discipline of the working class is prepared. This is achieved by systematic entryism in the trade unions, cooperatives, and every form of organization in the working class interests. Similar organizational networks must arise as soon as possible in all fields of party activity: armed struggle and military action, education and culture, youth and women's work, penetration of the army, and so on. The goal of such work is the realization of, well, the army isn't exactly a worker, um, a form of organization of working class interests, but I fully understand. And so on. The goal of such work is the realization of not only ideological but also organizational influence of the Communist Party on the largest part of the working class. Consequently, in their work in the trade unions, and the communists tend to realize a maximum extension of their base, as well as all other organizations of a similar nature, fighting every split and advocating organizational unification where a split exists, so long as they're guaranteed the minimum required for possibilities to work for communist propaganda and entryism. The activity in special cases can also be illegal and secret. The Communist parties, while working with the program of securing the leadership of the trade union centers, an indispensable apparatus of maneuver in the revolutionary struggles by means of the conquest of the majority of the organized workers, except in any case of discipline to the decision of the latter, and do not pretend that in the statutes of the trade union organizations or in special pacts the commitment to a control of the party is sanctioned. All right, so we're going to take this. So the party does entryism into trade unions, co-ops, all other worker orgs. It develops organizational networks in all forms of party activity: armed struggle, military action, education and culture, youth and women's work, penetration of the army, etc. It struggles against splits and tries to maximize extension of the base. Back to the text. The United Front. The capitalist offensive and its particular present-day features offer special tactical possibilities to the Communist parties to increase their influence on the masses. From this arises the tactic of the United Front. The capitalist offensive has the double objective of destroying the proletarian organizations capable of revolutionary offensive, while also intensifying the economic exploitation of the workers in order to attempt to reconstruct the bourgeois economy. The capitalist offensive therefore directly impacts against the interests even of those proletarians who have not yet gained consciousness and a revolutionary understanding, and attacks those same organizations which do not have a revolutionary program and are led by opportunist elements. The bureaucracy which leads these organizations, while understanding that accepting even a defensive struggle is equivalent to posing a revolutionary problem, and thus placing the workers on the front of a struggle against the bourgeois class and its institutions, sabotages even the purely defensive resistance, while renouncing the illusory program of a gradual improvement of the living conditions of the proletariat. This situation allows the Communist parties to lead the struggle of even the part of the workers who do not have a developed political consciousness. Communist parties have the possibility to invite these strata of workers to united actions for those concrete and immediate claims that consist in the defense of their interests threatened by the offensive of capital. To this end, the Communists propose a common action of all the proletarian forces within the organization of the most diverse tendencies. Its tactic must never be in contrast with the fundamental task of the Communist Party, that is, the diffusion within the worker masses of the consciousness that only the Communist program and the tactic organizational framework around the Communist Party will lead them to their emancipation. The prospects of the United Front are twofold. The invitation to United Front will serve for a campaign against the programs and influence of the other proletarian organizations. If they refuse the invitation to action made by the communists, it is evident, in that case, the advantage of the Communist Party. If, on the other hand, an action in which all the other proletarian organizations and the whole proletariat participate is really achieved, the Communist Party aims to succeed in taking the leadership of the movement when the general conditions allow it to lead to a revolutionary outcome. When this is not possible, the Communist Party must try by all means to achieve, through the events of the struggle, a partial success of it, or, if failure is inevitable, the conviction by the masses that the Communist Party is best prepared to take the cause of the proletariat prevail. The Communist Party, if it has previously campaigned on the precise proposals which would guarantee the success of the struggle, will be able, through the participation in the front lines of its forces in the common action, to make the masses form the conviction that victory will be possible when non-communist organizations do not have a prevailing influence on them. The tactic of the United Front is therefore a means for the conquest of a preponderant ideological and organizational influence of the party. The instinctive tendency of the masses towards unity must be used when it can serve the favorable employment of the tactics of the United Front. It must be fought when it would lead to the opposite result. The serious tactical problem of the United Front therefore presents limits outside of which our action would fail in its own ends. The limits must be defined in relation to the content of the claims and the means of struggle to be proposed, and in relation to the organizational basis to be proposed for or accepted as the platform of the proletarian forces. The claims which the Communist Party puts forward for the United Front must be such that they do not conflict with the programs of the various bodies who will form the proposed coalition, and they must be achievable by methods of struggle which none of these bodies reject on principle. Only in such a case will it be possible to campaign against these organizations which refuse their adherence to the proposed United Front. In the opposite case, only in such a way will it be possible to use the course of action to the advantage of communist influence. All demands that can be pursued through direct party action can be put forward: the defense of wages and labor agreements in industry and agriculture, the struggle against layoffs and unemployment, the effective defense of the right of association and agitation. All means of struggle can be proposed as means of struggle can be proposed all those that the Communist Party does not reject for its own independent actions. Therefore, all forms of propaganda, agitation, struggle in which the proletarian class places itself clearly and avowedly against capital. Finally, the basis of the coalition must be that, since the whole of the Communist proposals is known to the masses, even when the other proletarian organisms have not accepted them, but nevertheless initiate a general proletarian action, for example, using means of struggle suggested by the Communist Party, general strike, etc., but with other objectives. The Communist Party, while not keeping itself outside the common action, can nevertheless shift the responsibility of its direction onto other organisms in case of defeat of the proletariat. So I could count on one hand the number of people who know in my life that know the actual proposals of communists, right? Just unfortunately, we have been so propagandized against that. Apparently, like, Democrats are communists and stuff like that. So I don't think that necessarily works there. Anyway, the Communist Party will not accept, therefore, to be part of organisms common to various political bodies which act with continuity and with collective responsibility in the direction of the general movement of the proletariat. The Communist Party will also avoid appearing as a partner in common declarations with political parties. Failure. When these declarations contradict even partially its program, are brought to the proletariat as a result of negotiations to find a common line of action. Especially in cases where there's not a question of brief public polemic in which other organizations are invited to action with certain expectation that they will refuse. But there is rather a possibility of uniting in struggle. The leading center of the coalition must be realized in a alliance of proletarian organizations of a union character or similar. In this way, this center will present itself to the masses as conquerable by the various parties acting within the workers' organization. Only in this way will the useful employment of the United Work Front tactic be assured, even through an action which, through the influence of opportunists, ends in an incomplete victory or even in a defeat of the working class. The workers' government. The immediate claims that interests of proletariat can also be related to the politics of the state. These claims must be formulated by the Communist Party and proposed as objectives of the action of the whole proletariat conducted through an external pressure on the government, exercised with all means of agitation. When the proletariat finds that in order to achieve these demands it is necessary to change the existing government, the Communist Party must base its propaganda for the overthrow of bourgeois power and for the proletarian dictatorship on this fact. The same way as when the workers find that in their economic demands have no place in the capitalist economy. Okay, so the Communist Party must agitate for immediate action, which is impossible for a bourgeois government. The proletariat will realize that bourgeois governments cannot achieve their demands, and then the party agitates for an overthrow on the grounds that the bourgeois state cannot provide for their interests. This is baby tactics, but quite obvious, right? And it's always hilarious to me that you know, if we understand bourgeois parliament as and bourgeois democracy, or just democracy in general, as two people in a marketplace bargaining, right? Bartering, and one person, and they're trying to reach equilibrium where neither person is happy or anything like that. Then obviously, both sides of the argument should argue the highest that they can possibly argue for at the first place, with the expectation that they will be argued down. Like, if you've ever been in a negotiation, right, you start high and then you get bargained down. It's hilarious to me that people just let it go, and like the Democrat Party starts low and then lets itself go lower. I'm suddenly reminded of Biden's 3.8 trillion, I think it was, bill that got argued down further, whereas Bernie is like 11 trillion. Like, that's proper negotiation technique. You start ridiculous and possible, and then you get bargained down to where you're actually aiming for. In our case, though, we don't want to be capable of being bargained down to. We want to be doing stuff that's blatantly impossible, like saying, we want you to abolish private property. And then the bourgeois says, like, we can't do that because that's the basis of the existence of the bourgeoisie and thereby the bourgeois state. And then we say, see, guys, they can't do it. You've got to get rid of them and then establish a proletarian state that can. Easy peasy. Anyway, when the governmental regime is in a critical situation due to the relations of social forces, it is necessary to make the overthrow of this regime not mere propaganda, but a concrete claim accessible to the masses. This demand, power to the Soviets, to the control committees, to the committees of the Trade Union Alliance, can be put to the workers of all parties and without parties represented in these bodies. All workers will be led to accept it even against their leaders. It is part of the political task unique to the Communist Party, since its realization involves a revolutionary struggle and the suppression of bourgeois democracy, and proposing it leads the entire proletarian mass on this path. But it is not to be excluded that such an extra-parliamentary word can also be given in parliament or electoral campaign. To speak of a workers' government as a coalition government of workers' parties, without indicating what will be the form of the representative institution on which such a government will be able to rest, is not to launch a claim understandable to the workers, but only to give a word of propaganda which confuses the terms of the ideological and political revolutionary preparation. The parties are organizations formed to take the government, and the parties that form the workers' government cannot be those that are for the preservation of bourgeois parliamentary institutions. To speak of workers' government declaring or not excluding that can arise from parliamentary coalition in which the Communist Party participates means practically denying the Communist political program. that is, the necessity of the preparation of the masses for the struggle for dictatorship. The political situation of the world is not such as to foresee the formation of transitional government between bourgeois parliamentary regime and proletarian dictatorship, but rather of bourgeois coalition governments, which will lead with extreme energy the struggle for counter-revolutionary defense. Should transitional governments arise, it is a necessity of principle for the Communist Party to lead the responsibility of directing them to the social democratic parties, so long as they arise on the basis of bourgeois institutions. Only in this way can the Communist Party devote itself to the preparation of the revolutionary conquest of power and the inheritance of the transitional government. The conquest of the unorganized masses. The existence of strong and flourishing economic organizations is a good condition for work of penetrating the masses. The accentuation of the breakdown of the capitalist economy creates an objectively revolutionary situation. But since the buying capacity of the proletariat proved to be insufficient at the moment after the apparent prosperity of the immediate post-war period, and the crisis appeared in all of its gravity, we are thus witnessing today the emptying out of trade unions and all similar organizations in many countries. In others, it is foreseeable that such a phenomenon won't take long to come. As a result, the revolutionary preparation of the proletariat is becoming difficult, despite the spread of poverty and discontent. In the forefront is the problem of organizing behind the Communist parties the layers of the jobless and the proletarian elements reduced to a precarious state by the paralysis of the productive machine. It is possible that in some time this problem will appear more serious than that of the conquest of the workers who followed the other proletarian parties, through the economic organizations directed by them, a problem which is being faced with the tactics of the United Front. On the contrary, it must be considered that, as the intensity of the counter-revolutionary united action of all bourgeois forces is accompanied by economic decadence, the non-communist proletarian economic organizations will be emptied out more rapidly. In terms of the problem of the conquest of the masses will be changed. A new form of organization of proletarian interests will have to be realized, the revolutionary work always having to be based on the real concrete situations. In the present stage, the task is outlined of organizing around the committees and organs a unique front of organizations, with appropriate forms of representation, the struggle of proletarians without organization. The Communist Party will have to be the center of the struggle and of the redemption against reactionary capitalist centralization, tending to impose itself on the scattered and dispersed working class, and definitively abandoned to itself by the opportunist bureaucracy. And this is absolutely where we are, for the most part. So as the workers lose their ability to be in worker organizations for one reason or another, the Communist Party needs to organize in a new way. One, it must be able to reach proletarians without organizations. The internet has been very helpful for this. It must be the center of the struggle. It must be able to combat reactionary capitalist centralization. This reaction imposes itself on a scattered working class, which left opportunist leadership. And let's look through these appendices real quick. Session 27, November 30, 1922, declaration by the left at the 4th Congress of the IC on the project of organization of the International. So this is Bordiga here. I find the draft organization completely acceptable in all its parts. It contains provisions which, objectively considered, are of great importance because they aim at eliminating the last remnants of the Federalist type of organizational methods of the old International. If at this stage of the Congress it were still possible to broaden the discussion a little more, I could raise a question as to all that's needed to make effective revolutionary centralization work is achievable through reform of the organizational apparatus. I've already said something about this in my discussion of the report of the executive and will not repeat myself now. However, I must reiterate that if we want to achieve an effective centralization, that is, a synthesis of the spontaneous forces of the vanguard, the revolutionary movement into different countries, in order to eliminate the disciplinary crisis we see today, we must centralize our organizational apparatus, But at the same time, we must unify our methods of struggle and clearly specify what the program and the tactics of the Italian Communist Party, I don't know, IC, are about. We must explain to all groups and comrades belonging to the IC, I think International Communist, exactly what is meant by a duty of unconditional obedience by they contract by joining our ranks. As for the international congresses, I fully agree on the abolition of imperative mandates and on the manner of convening national congresses. I unreservedly admit that we are dealing here with measures which correspond to principles of centralization. But I'm of the opinion that, in the interest of true centralization, we should not merely declare that the imperative mandates must be abolished and that the World Congress is held before the National Congress. For on the very work and organization of the World Congresses, even graver words must be said. We have reached the last session of the Congress, and we must note that the work done is not in all respects satisfactory. For example, the questions of resignations remains open. I agree that resignations must be prevented. I'd suggest, however, the adoption of a rule already in effect in our party, according to which all resignations are accepted and the person who has tendered them cannot resume his place in the party within the next 1 or 2 years. I believe that this procedure would have an effect of considerably reducing the number of resignations. But there's another issue I feel I must address despite the stage the Congress is at. The proposal for a 2-year interval between World Congresses. If the next Congress should not be so heavy with work and issues as the present one, it would certainly be advisable not to repeat this impressive organizational and financial effort. But I raise the specific question of the time that separates us from the 5th Congress. We are about to postpone to the next Congress a series of questions of the utmost importance, especially the presentation of a new program, or rather the first real program, of the IC, the revision of its statutes, which is to say, the organic link that unites the international and sections. After the executive's report, we discussed at length the question of tactics, but the very speakers who took the stand did not deal with the great problem of the international's tactics, limiting themselves to discussing a few remarks in the executive committee on the activity or situation of this or that national section. Very important questions, such as that of workers' government, on the other hand, were not clarified. I don't propose to reopen now a big debate on the question of tactics, but if I think about the program, the statutes, the tactics, I find absurd the idea of convening the 5th Congress only in 2 years. In the name of the majority of the Italian delegation, I therefore reserve the right to present the proposal that the 5th Congress of the IC, taking into account the postponement of very important issues, should be held in summer or autumn of 1923 at the latest. Kolarov, on behalf of the Executive Committee, clarifies that the 5th Congress will be held next year, and the decisions regarding the 2-year interval between World Congresses will not come into effect until later. And I actually wanted to take this right here of all of that. So centralization equals synthesis of spontaneous forces of the vanguard of various countries. Centralization of organizational apparatuses across countries stops disciplinary crises, and unity of methods of struggle and clarity of program and tactics are needed. And that's what Bordiga has to say in terms of organization here. And that is the text of the theses presented by the Communist Party of Italy. Next up will be the Communist Party of Italy report on fascism. And we will be reading that tomorrow. Thanks for attending the session today, and have a great day.